Hi, Nick. How are you?
Hi, Hannah. How are you going?
Very well indeed. Super excited to dig into your amazing career that has recently you're involved in some really exciting emerging tech. And I know that you've worked for some really interesting, big and varied organizations up until now. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could share with our audience a bit of a potted history of your career to date.
Sure. It's a bit of a windy road, so it's definitely been really interesting. And as I've reflected back, it's definitely hasn't been linear, and I think a lot of it has been driven by my curiosity and willingness to learn new things, and obviously take a few risks in terms of my career choices, and ultimately working hard and making sure that I deliver, of course. But so I started as an accountant many years ago, working for a large corporate company, which is called Coca-Cola Amatil. And for context, obviously Coca-Cola Amatil dealt with Coca-Cola products like Coke, Sprite, Fanta Lift, but it was a Australian publicly listed company. It did all the sales, manufacturing, logistics, and distribution for the Coca-Cola products, as well as had a couple of other ventures like alcohol and coffee brands as well, and had its own few brands as well. So only up until recently, when it's got sold off to Coca-Cola European Partners, was it an Australian owned company, and it was valued, would generate about $3 billion worth of revenue. Anyway, that's just some context. So I started as a financial accountant, and within 12 months was a sales accountant, and then became a sales accounting manager. And I had a team of 8. And I guess this is sort of like the start of my curiosity. So this role meant I was working with the sales teams and sales managers, and for Coca-Cola Amatil, sales was like the epicenter of all things. If the mantra was, if you're not selling to a customer, you had to be doing something to help someone sell to a customer. So sales is like really important within Coke. So my sales accounting team at the time were doing things like entering customer master, promotional pricing, rebates, anything that had a financial impact on a particular customer, and their roles were structured around system functionality. Our sales team, on the other hand, were all structured by channels, so grocery, immediate consumption, cafes and hotels, that sort of thing. So this was really the start of me trying to understand what did my customer, my internal customer, being the sales team, really want, and what did they need us to be delivering. And I guess one of the key things and pieces of feedback was they wanted a single point of contact within our team. And at the moment at the time they were talking to multiple people. So I looked at, how can I restructure my team and make it more aligned with my customer? So I restructured to being channel aligned team rather than system aligned, which now sounds like a big deal, but at the time it was a really big deal, and it was quite groundbreaking, let's say. And I had a really big impact, not only on the sales side of the business, because I had that single point of contact. I had someone who now had a better understanding of the business, and for my team, it meant that they were cross-skilled across multiple areas and understand what the sales team really needed. So that, I guess, was the catalyst for me getting a whole lot of opportunities, because that sort of structure was rolled out across all the other states across the country, because it generated such a great buzz. So I guess my next major role was in a role in Sydney. So I'm based in Melbourne normally, and it was a national program manager delivering a sales information system, which I had no clue what to do, but give it a go. And the exciting part was I got to move to Sydney for a few years with my hubby, which was a great adventure. And I think that role was probably one of the hardest jobs of my entire career, but also one of the ones where I learnt the most in terms of, I guess, tenacity. It was definitely It was a project that went for a year and a half, and it was building a new sales information system for all the sales teams across Australia and New Zealand. And it was a real political hot cake. So I guess the skills that I learnt from that, other than obviously project management, was stakeholder management, problem solving, trying to understand where the motivation was for all these curveballs that were coming my way, and trying to work out how to sell a story very simply, and what was in it for them, what was in it, what was the benefit for me pushing forward with this system. End up getting implemented, rolled out to 500 sales managers across Australia and New Zealand, which was great, and it left quite a legacy for the next 10 years. So post that, had some super interesting roles. One was called Growth Creation Strategist, which was looking at an organisation with a process-orientated lens. Best title ever. A National Sales Planning Manager, which was around strategy and execution planning for sales reps, and what they needed to focus on month to month. You know, when new products came, how were they going to execute that? So my job was to build a plan and roll that out to all the sales reps across Australia. Then I went back into finance as a senior commercial manager, which was around being a business advisor to the GMs and the senior state managers, sales managers. Then I took a role in sales because there was a lot of rah-rah about sales, and I wanted to understand what the rah-rah was all about and be customer facing. And so I looked after some 2 major convenience and petroleum customers, which was great, which was a really great insight. And I was able to bring a lot of my other skills around project management and rolling out MPDs or new products, but also learnt the art of negotiating. And then one of the last couple of roles within Coca-Cola, and one of them was actually, the first one was quite funny how I got it. I was when our dollar was 1-for-1 from a US to Australia perspective, and online was just starting to become a thing, online shopping. And I'd just been to New York, and there was all these great brands that I wanted to buy. And so I would start to buy these brands, and they'd roll up at work, and we'd do the unveiling, and there's all a big buzz about, you know, what's Nicole bought now this time. So my manager at the time was the sales director, and he's like, and at the time there was also Catch of the Day had just sort of come onto the market and was just disrupting the grocery market. Supermarketdeals.com.au was also causing a bit of a stir. And so my boss is like, "No, you know something about online shopping?" I'll go, "I do online shopping." He goes, "We need someone to put a strategy together, how we're going to tackle this space." And so that's how I got into digital, was through my online shopping. But anyway, so I developed a go-to-market strategy of how we were going to play in that space, but also then identified a gap that we were missing out on, and so built it was like a direct-to-consumer website for grassroots sports and special events. Which then led to me going into a role of ecom and digital marketing for our direct-to-consumer side of the business, and doing a complete digital transformation of that space, growing an online business for that D2C space, which was awesome. So I finally left Coke after quite a few years, and I think gained lots of diverse experiences. And I think I know it's probably not something that happens so much now, where people stay at a particular company for a long time, but I think the benefit for me for staying there so long was that it gave me the opportunity to really sort of cross different career paths, cross different areas, because I built a reputation and trust that I would deliver and get things done. And I was always very passionate about the business units that I was generally in. So from there, I went to BHP, an even bigger company, and it was a 3-month actually contract that I started in, and it was being a lead for diversity and inclusion, and it was actually for the technology operations part of the business, to develop a strategy about how to increase their diversity, female participation, I guess, was really low. And honestly, I thought, now this role is really out of my comfort zone, because I have never done anything in this space. I've been a mentor in women's, leadership programs and stuff like that, but I've never actually been a HR person. That's really going too far. But the person who asked me to do it was an ex-colleague at Coke, and they said, well, we actually want a project management manager that's going to deliver, rather than someone who knows all about diversity and inclusion. So I took on that role, and was able to make a bit of an impact pretty early on. And then I was offered a role to be a project manager for their cloud acceleration program. Once again, took a risk, had no idea about cloud. And I remember in the first few meetings, the first few weeks, I had to just record each meeting, because it was like they were speaking a completely foreign language, and I then have to Google all these words. And then they were doing agile. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what agile, how that all works. I'm meant to be an agile project manager. You do learn these things, you pick them up, and you also, if you Google, you can find out pretty much anything. And so did that for 12 months, and that was really successful, and we were able to hand that over to the BAU part of the business. And then went into a strategy integration role. I did sort of decide this mining industry is probably not for me. It's not, I can't be super passionate about it. And so it was also at the time when crypto and NFTs were exploding around the world. So that sort of piqued my interest, and I started dabbling and geeking out on it. And I started watching YouTube and whatever. But I think the best learning for me was actually setting up a digital wallet, buying some crypto, selling some crypto, buying an NFT. That just gave me a great insight on how it all sort of hangs together and how it works and how things don't work. And it's funny how the whole universe works. And just pretty much at that time, when I had just told my manager that, BHP and mining's not for me, I got a call from an old colleague who was overseas, but he was starting to work at this company called Grande Experiences, and he's like, "Oh, do you know anything about NFTs?" I'm like, "Oh, actually, I know a little bit." And he goes, "Oh, we need someone to come in and head up this creative business around NFTs." So that's how my role came about, very roundabout way. But like I said, a lot of my roles have not been linear. A lot have been moving sideways, and often driven by curiosity and challenging myself.
Super interesting, and also how curious and proactive you are in the Googling, YouTube, some of it out of necessity when you're in the cloud migration job, and some of it just out of curiosity, like the NFTs and crypto by the sounds of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And can I just clarify, when you said you recorded meetings, do you mean you actually recorded them on your phone or
yes. Something? Yeah, no, I would say to them, is it okay if we record this meeting just from when I started, just for my learning, and just so I can take minutes, post the meeting, because I literally was writing words I did not know what they were talking about. And so I would, take some notes and actions and things like that, because I was the program manager. And then I was also working out what they were talking about.
Yeah, such a great idea.
It does come to you after time, but at first it was really, really foreign, and it was like I'd been in the tech space, but I've always been on the business side of the tech space, and I was exposed to quite a lot of technical terms, but the deep cloud stuff was quite foreign at the time.
I can imagine. I bet there was lots of poring over the same meeting, probably re-listening to it 3 or 4 times, wasn't there? To kind of there's kind of listening, then there's thinking you get it, then there's really getting it.
Yeah, exactly right.
Brilliant career trajectory. Like, good on you for taking so many moments of some big leaps of faith, really. And it is pretty interesting that you got the call about NFTs. It sounds like you've got a reputation for throwing yourself in and it working. So what was your role with was it Grande Experience?
Grande Experiences, yeah. So it was literally to set up a new business. So Grande Experiences does large-scale digital immersive experiences or shows. So many would probably know things like it's Van Gogh Live that has been shown around the country and has been in Melbourne and it's been in Sydney. I think in Sydney at the moment they've got Monet and Friends. So it's these big, let's say, warehouse spaces where, for example, Van Gogh has been animated and the animation team are based out of Melbourne, and there's a story about Van Gogh and his sort of life, but it's in these really large scale immersive, people, you know, can lie on the ground, kids can run around, experiences. Anyway, the founder and CEO is based out of Melbourne, brilliant guy, and he does, I guess he does that content and provides it to touring operators all around the world. So one of the other shows he had developed was called Street Art Alive. Anyway, so my role was to come in and look at, okay, how do we create a NFT business within the, and how can I leverage what Grande Experiences does, which is creates content, has got a whole creative team, does these touring operations. How can I sort of mesh the two? So I had put together a strategy. There was a lot of back and forwards between the CEO and I about, you know, what that looked like, and we wanted to also make sure, because NFTs was new, was very volatile, still is. Whatever we did or whatever I did didn't have I guess a detrimental impact on the broader business or brand if things didn't go well. So one of the launches that was coming up in April, end of April last year, was Street Art Alive, that was going live in LA. And so that ended up being, I guess, the stake in the ground of what I had to deliver from a timeline perspective and working backwards from a project plan point of view. So we decided that I would build some street art NFTs, which was, you know, and then create a business name, create a website, all those sort of skills that I'd learned, you know, create a executable project plan, a financial modeling, budget, all that sort of stuff that I'd done on all the previous parts of my career all sort of came together. I guess the new parts was the tech and the blockchain and the NFTs, and I'd had obviously that little bit of experience playing around with crypto myself and buying an NFT, but those skills I had to learn on the job in terms of, where do I mint an NFT? What does that actually mean? What's actually happening? And then how did I do it? It was basically Googling. I didn't really know many people in the space, so started to go to NFT events, I guess, and try to sort of build a network of people. But a lot of it was Google, and then just testing, learning, trying to understand what the pros and cons of each of the platforms to mint an NFT was. And then started working with street artists from all around the world, got to meet some amazing people, really got deep into the street art space, talking to them and seeing what their appetite was to collaborate on an NFT, using their base artwork as the core, and then using our team, the Grande team, to animate it and bring it to life, and adding music, and then having a profit share arrangement with those artists. So yeah, so that's kind of how it all came about, and got to launch the NFTs in a NFT lounge in LA, at the end of April when they launched the Street Art Alive. And so as people exited out of the experience, they would go through the NFT lounge and see the NFTs showcased before they went into the merchandise store.
How cool. How cool.
I've got to say, even I thought it was super cool. I got to meet some amazing people.
And if you leave any experience, I mean, I'm thinking about coming off a roller coaster, and you look at the picture, don't you, of yourself on the roller coaster and laugh at your facial expression, but you spend a fortune on that photo. Or if you go to an exhibition and you buy something afterwards, the fact that you could then get some technology, some digital, own something digital that reminds you of that event and is worth something and supports, in this case, a digital artist, seems like that's got so much legs moving forward.
I know. And
so
sorry,
cool.
I was going to say, what I guess the other thing that I was trying to do, which I try and do with every, I guess, part of every role that I do, was trying to demystify the technology. So, by having NFTs showcased on screens, it got to show people what an NFT piece of art might look like in their house or whatever. So, trying to demystify for the end consumer what does it look like for them? What could it look like if they had that piece of art in their house?
So, what would that involve? How would you demystify it?
So there were screens, and so a lot of people didn't know what an NFT was. What's an NFT? Or, a lot of people would ask me at parties or whatever, what's an NFT? But by creating an NFT lounge, you could actually say, this is an NFT. It's a piece of, or for us, it was an animated piece of art that you could buy, and that if you had a screen, you could showcase that at your house on the wall, like we had in this particular lounge.
Excellent. That is breaking it down into the real life application.
Yeah.
I suppose then also thinking, okay, you own it, because do you get, if you bought it there and then, would you get a contract or would you get some paperwork?
You don't, it's all on the blockchain. So the contract is actually on the blockchain, embedded in the blockchain. So yes, you do own that piece of work, and then you can resell it.
Amazing. Very cool. I wish I'd actually been able to come to one of those, especially an LA NFT lounge. Now, you referenced the skills that you use from prior experience, but I wonder if we could just go through those again, to sort of so that we can understand if people have got similar experiences or how you learned to apply those. So those skills that you were able to take into that role, and then just a summary, I guess, of then the new skills that you needed to get and how you went about it. I know you did some of your own research, didn't you? A lot of it.
So skills included developing a business plan, trying to take a holistic view and sort of forecast ahead, then breaking it up into bite-sized pieces so it became a project plan, and then looking at how much is this going to cost, so developing a financial model, and then a lot of it was stakeholder management, so talking to the CEO and the CFO, then communicating and sharing that vision with the broader team. So trying to bring everyone else on the journey. So once again, that's collaborating and sharing the vision, and had to collaborate with the creative team to either create or modify some of the animations. And the legal team, so developing T&Cs, working with agencies, so creating websites, and managing socials as well, and then promoting it. So they were some of the skills I learned in those previous roles. And some of those new skills was, like I said, the technology, trying to understand how NFT art could be bought and sold, and what was the best technology to use, and that was really through research, reading lots of documents online, trying to get testimonials, what had other people used, yeah, that I think I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, they're probably the key ones, I guess. Yeah, and just research, a lot of research, because there wasn't a lot at the time. So this is 12, over 12, just under 12 months ago, 12 months ago. There wasn't a lot that I could find. So I was trying to talk to who I could. And like I said, going into NFT events and trying to speak to people about what are they doing, what tools have they used, and trying to work through it that way. But there wasn't a lot around, I've got to say. So a lot of it was just playing and using my best guess as to what I thought would last the distance, and and that would stay around, and which sort of platforms I thought would not fall over very quickly. So OpenSea was one of those platforms. Manifold Studio was where I minted it, and they don't probably mean anything to anyone, but the reason why I mentioned those is I selected Manifold because a whole lot of really famous artists were using that platform to put their NFTs onto and have their own sort of contracts, and then selling it on OpenSea. It's the largest third-party marketplace for NFTs, and I thought, well, if it's the largest, it's most likely going to stand the test of time over time. So just making sort of educated decisions based on experience and what I thought would experience, pretty much.
It's absolutely brilliant, and that's the buzzword, I think, experience. Siren Forte is very much about, we've been often 2 decades down the career path, and the application of your experience was so important there, because you've built up that acumen and the astuteness around what could go wrong, I suppose, because earlier you talked about the trust. What would happen if you went with something not reputable? It could affect the broader, grander experiences brand. So I think it's a very, very good example and good application of your experience in a new field. And also
thanks,
it's great. But then also, is there any maybe broader skill set or perspective that you'd give about learning some of those areas, given that you went from being an accountant as well to these areas? I think it's a great demonstration of that you don't need to pigeonhole yourself, isn't it?
No, very true, very true. I guess if anyone is interested in a tech or digital role, I guess the first piece of advice I would give anyone is that you don't necessarily need to be doing technical stuff. You can be in a tech space or tech business, in HR or marketing or community management or accounting or whatever. So you don't need to necessarily, I guess, limit yourself because you're not a programmer or you're not super technical. I think you can get into those spaces through other avenues. I think if you're interested, I think it's also up to you to expand your own personal knowledge. And that could be during online courses, YouTube, educating yourself. But I guess, say, for example, you're interested in e-commerce and Shopify is one of the biggest platforms in the world and you want to get into that space. I just suggest go, learn about Spotify on YouTube or wherever, but also just open up a free Shopify account, and do a mock e-commerce platform for yourself, and just by actually physically doing things, you just learn so much more, and you get to really try to understand how things work and how things set up. And I think that makes it so much more valuable when you're then going to talk to someone about, I want to get into e-commerce, and you can say, well, I've actually, set up my own dummy e-commerce platform, and these are the things I've learnt. So I think actually doing and physically trying things out is really helps fast track your learning. I think you can read and watch a lot of things, but doing it yourself helps really sort of crystallize, or it does for me anyway, and that it did from a crypto perspective. Having to create a wallet and transfer money from my bank account into my crypto and going, oh my God, is it going to make it? You know, all that sort of stuff. I think it gives you a real insight on how things sort of hang together. Yeah, and I think the other piece of advice I would say is, if you're interested in digital or tech, let people around you know. Let you know, put it out there. And let your managers know, or let people that you work with, or people that you deal with know that you're interested in that space, and find ways to learn more if it's within your organisation. Find ways to, I don't know, buddy with someone for a couple hours a week, or you know, let your manager know that you'd be interested in opportunities, and try and demonstrate what skills you can bring to those roles, even though you might not have experience in that particular space. And probably the last piece of advice would be, take a risk, do something outside of your comfort zone. The worst that can happen is it doesn't work and you go back to, you know, what you were doing before, but just take a risk. And I think you can only broaden your perspective and understanding of different parts of business, and different parts of, or different skills, which you can then apply either to roles within organisation or to your own sort of business or side hustle.
That's wonderful. And I think all of those are great tips. I do like the one about talking to your managers, your colleagues, people in your network, because actually there's so many projects that will be happening to drive efficiency, or as more software becomes available, or technology, and you might not know that that project is happening in another area of the business, I imagine. Yeah,
exactly right. Yeah. And you know, people aren't going to know that you're interested unless you tell them. So just tell them.
And also, I really like that if you like online shopping, people could be watching that and say, you know what, you'd be really good at an e-commerce job. So get your e-commerce purchases delivered to the office and drop a massive hint. That's so great. You'll have to tell me all your New York top tips for the best purchases. Thanks so much for joining us on Fire and Forte and sharing those tips, because they're incredibly insightful. And like we've said, to go from accountant into all of these different industries and tech fields, and to have gathered all of the experience and skills that you've got is very encouraging, actually, to know that paths don't need to be linear these days. So thanks for sharing those.
Thanks so much for having me, Hannah.
Take care. All the very best.
Thank you.